Okay, what is the White House thinking? Do you think President Obama has a serious messaging problem?
We get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place. Remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
It is entirely legitimate for the American people to be deeply concerned when you've got a bunch of violent, vicious zealots who behead people or randomly shoot a bunch of folks in a deli in Paris.
Violent extremism is something that we want to be focused on, and it's not just Islamic violent extremism.
Still, while the dangers we face may be more numerous and varied, they are not of the existential nature we confronted during World War II or during the Cold War.
And Karl Rove joins us. Good evening, Karl.
Evening, Greta.
Karl, the messaging certainly, from my opinion, seems pretty lousy. I mean, he made that lousy comparison at the prayer breakfast. That was pretty tone deaf. He won't say Islamic extremists. I don't know what he thinks what's going on in that grocery store, that kosher grocery store in Paris. I can go on and on and on and on. But I assume you agree with me on the messaging. My question, is it important that his messaging be better delivered?
Well, yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's troubling because his messaging, I think, reveals his inner self. This is who he really is. When he tells Fareed Zakaria in an interview in language that's repeated almost 2 weeks later by Susan Rice, that these terrorist groups don't represent, he said, an existential threat to the United States or the world order, it's revealing. And that statement is ludicrous. What would happen if Islamic State was able to achieve a caliphate in the middle of the heart of the Middle East, fueled by oil revenues? That would represent a threat to the world order. It would threaten our allies. It would threaten Israel. It would expand Iran's influence. It would expand dramatically Islamic terrorist activities all across the world, particularly Africa and Asia. And the president simply doesn't get it. And when he made the comment about the attack in Paris, I was astonished. It took the White House. Josh Earnest went out and tried to defend the proposition that this was a random attack in Paris. No, he picked a Jewish grocery so he could go kill Jews. It was an Islamic extremist with ties to the Islamic State, and we had the president's press spokesman out there telling the White House press, oh, the president was correct. This was just a random act, just a random place where he randomly shot people. They just all happened to be Jews.
Well, yeah, I guess, I mean, and you mentioned the existential threat. If it's not an existential threat, as he said on February 1st, and as Susan Rice said 5 days later, then why in the world is he now going to Congress and saying on February 15th it's an existential threat that needs an authorization of force? I don't get this. I mean, it's rather confusing.
Right, absolutely. And look, it is a threat, and he does have authority, I believe, under the 2001 authorization for the use of force and the 2002. But I can understand why he might want to go to the Congress in order to get their congressional buy-in on this specific effort against ISIL. However, I've listened to some of the things that were said earlier on your program and on Bret Baier's. It's absolutely true. Think about this. He has a 3-year time limit. Why? What's magic about 3 years? Well, it gets it into the next presidency. But putting a time limit on these could be dangerous. Think about our own experience in the Civil War. War is declared in April hostilities break out in April of 1861. What if the Congress, in this 3 years later, in 1864, had to renew that action? They might not have. That was the summer when Lincoln thought he was going to be defeated. Things were going so badly.
But see, Karl, I go back to the messaging. Do you really take that 3 years seriously? I don't think he has that 3-year thing. I think is meaningless to him. I think he did that for political reasons, because he's supposed to be the non-war president, and he's asking. I don't think for 1 second that he even is serious about the 3 years. That's just a political. That's to satisfy his supporters. Totally.
Yeah, I think that's right. As is incidentally the provision that says no ground troops. He's the commander-in-chief. He retains the authority, if hostilities are declared, to take whatever actions are necessary so he can send ground troops. But again, this is cosmetics. This is to be able to say to his left-wing base that I'm being true to my progressive roots. I'm the man who came to end wars, not to win wars, and everybody goes home happy. But it is, you heard Catherine Herridge talk about how we don't have good intelligence in Iraq. Why is that? Because we withdrew the American forces, the military forces, who simply helped the Iraqis collect and analyze and integrate all of that material. And they weren't frontline combat troops, but they played an enormously important role. And the president may be trying to keep that from happening again for very bad political reasons.
Carl, thank you. And straight ahead, Yemen, it is blowing up. It's in chaos. U.S. Embassy staff is now fleeing the country as rebels seize American cars and weapons. So is Yemen's threat to our national security now growing? Ambassador John Bolton is here next.